Secretary Bessent and others in the administration have had with us to ensure better trade agreements that open market access for American products and services and hold foreign trading partners accountable. Thank you, Secretary, for your hard work in advancing the President's agenda. I look forward to continuing to work with you and appreciate you taking time to answer our questions today. I am pleased to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Neal, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. Forgive me if I point out that we've all heard this argument before. Tax cuts and growth. 201, 203, $2.3 trillion of tax cuts. 2017, let's borrow $2.3 trillion in tax cuts as we project economic growth. But somehow tax cuts pay for themselves because that's the theology that became so popular. When there's a Democrat sitting in the White House, it's always about the national debt. When there's a Republican sitting in the White House, it's always about tax cuts. During our conversation that went pretty well, Mr. Secretary, I did remind you that you are a successor to Alexander Hamilton. I have known the men and women who have had the title that you have today. It'll be the title at the end of your life you perhaps, other than a family person, will cherish the most. The people that have had this job, they don't fudge the numbers. The people that have had this job, they don't bend to political considerations. They give advice based upon reality and the success you've had in your career. Since Republicans reclaimed power, they've had a trifecta. What have we seen? It's the constant chaos. Whether it's been the DOGE shadow operating as they rifle through confidential data, the blatant weaponization of the IRS, as they've attempted to change tax collection policy in this country. They have misled us, they have circumvented oversights, they have misled the public, and they have bent the levers of power to benefit those in the Oval Office. This committee is rubber stamping all of it. That is not our job. The members on this committee know I questioned Democratic presidents when I disagreed with them publicly and stayed with my disagreement if I thought it was based on principle. We see none of that any longer. It's what is stated at the White House that everybody acquiesces to on the Republican side. A blank check for the president. Never mind that we'll let wealthy tax cheats go. Never mind that the theology of tax cuts paying for themselves doesn't stand up. Never mind the pathology that if we only have tax cuts, it'll always work out. Well, they're attempting now to ram through what a very prominent former best friend of the president had to say. He called the tax bill an abomination. The Trump congressional Republicans certainly are about to make history. They're going to be responsible for adding $4 trillion to the national debt and simultaneously cutting health care for 16 million Americans. The changes that have taken place, the chaos of the tariff bill, we don't object to tariffs. When implied and suggested for an outcome, we object to the chaotic nature of how those tariffs are being applied. We've driven away friends across the globe. We've driven away careful allies. I negotiated USMCA. It was done the right way, and the president at the time said it was the best trade bill in the history of the world. Today, it's the worst trade bill in the history of the world. That's what we object to on the Democratic side. You've had a reputation, Mr. Secretary, for sound, fact-based decision-making. I hope it continues to set you apart from other members of the administration. But we shouldn't be attacking the scorekeepers. I have many days when I've disagreed with the Joint Committee on Taxation. I've had many days when I've disagreed with the Congressional Budget Office. I've had many days when I've disagreed with the World Bank. But I don't suggest it's partisan. I don't suggest that they're making up the numbers. I suggest instead it's an honest disagreement. And I don't come back to the argument that they don't know what they're talking about. The math here is true. It's projected correctly. $4 trillion at least to the national debt. That takes us from 36 to 40, $41 trillion of debt. When the new administration took office, they said clearly that the reality of their economic policies would be there for all to see. Well, you know what? They were accurate in that statement. The American people are being left behind in a system that is rigged, and I don't use that very often. The rich right now in America do not need a tax cut. Downward pressure on wages created by a lot of different issues should be reasoned and considered here in this committee. We could find an agreement with the Republican Party on an awful lot of things if we left the position clear, as we did in the previous administration, where those under $400,000 would have tax relief, not those over $400,000. Oversight is a sacred obligation of this Congress. Republicans need to at least, from time to time, ask a few real questions of the administration before the white flag of surrender goes up to these arguments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Today's sole witness is United States Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. The committee has received your written testimony, and it will be made part of the formal hearing record. Secretary Bessent, you have 5 minutes to deliver your remarks, and you may begin when you are ready.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, and members of the committee, I'm grateful to join you today. Treasury is committed to working with Congress to improve our nation's finances, create new jobs, and strengthen the economy. We look forward to coordinating with you on the President's budget, his tax priorities in the coming weeks. As part of this effort, I wish to highlight today the Treasury Department's efforts to advance President Trump's economic agenda on tax and trade. First, tax. I'm pleased to report that Treasury has just completed its most successful tax filing season in years, and we did so while improving efficiencies and cutting costs at the IRS. Critics of the President's efforts to modernize the IRS warned that the effort would result in a 10% shortfall in receipts. Instead, the opposite happened. April receipts this year were up 9.5% over the previous year, and receipts in May were up 14.7% over the previous year. Most remarkably, the President was able to achieve these results while reducing $2 billion in waste and planned IT spending at the IRS. This success has taken place against the backdrop of one of the most consequential tax proposals ever to come before Congress, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or as I will call it today, OBBB. The One Big Beautiful Bill will make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. This will provide individuals and businesses with certainty and build economic momentum. The legislation is squarely aimed at boosting the working and middle class and reinvigorating American manufacturing. According to the Council of Economic Advisors, the One Big Beautiful Bill will raise take-home pay between $7,800 and $13,300 for the average family of four. It will increase wages between $6,100 to $11,600 for the average worker, and it will cement no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and tax cuts for seniors. The One Big Beautiful Bill will also incentivize unprecedented investment in U.S. manufacturing. The legislation will provide 100% expensing for new factories, as well as existing factories that expand operations and support Made in America. It will streamline burdensome permitting processes that often stand in the way of new manufacturing projects. It's time for this country to start building things again, and the OBBB makes this possible. The administration is grateful for the leadership of this committee in shepherding the One Big Beautiful Bill through the House. We are working closely with members of the Senate to get this legislation to the President's desk. Trade is the second topic I wish to highlight. The progress we have made on tax issues over the last 4 months complements the significant progress we have made in rebalancing the global economy. Since I last testified before Congress in May, the President announced a historic U.S.-UK trade deal. This arrangement, which creates a $5 billion export opportunity for American ranchers, farmers, and manufacturers, is a preview of what's to come. Dozens of countries have engaged the administration thus far with offers to improve their trade relations with the United States. This includes China. I have just returned in the middle of last night from successful negotiations in London with a Chinese delegation that will not only stabilize the economic relationship between our two economies, but make it more balanced. China has a singular opportunity to stabilize its economy by shifting away from excess production towards greater consumption. But the country needs to be a reliable partner in trade negotiations. If China will course correct by upholding its end of the initial trade agreement we outlined in Geneva, and I believe after our talks in London they will, then the rebalancing of the world's two largest economies is possible. By challenging the decades-old status quo on tax and trade, President Trump is breathing new life into the American economy. More than 500,000 private sector payroll jobs have been added since January. Most importantly, inflation in the U.S. is at its slowest pace since 2021. And the numbers we received today take us back to the slowest pace since 2020. Most importantly, we are decelerating cost increases for shelter, food, and energy. After 4 years of price increases diminishing the U.S. standard of living, inflation is showing substantial improvement due to the administration's policies. Furthermore, the labor market remains strong with low unemployment and plentiful labor demand as job openings remain high. This strength has been exemplified in the recent performance of the stock market and consumer confidence data. The president's bold leadership on these issues has laid the ground for a golden age economy. With your help, we can build on that foundation to create even more prosperity and abundance for the American people. We hope you will join us in this endeavor. Thank you all, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to the question and answer session. One of the more absurd attacks we hear from our Democrat colleagues is that the one big beautiful bill is focused on the wealthy, not the working class. I'm sure the waitress who will keep more of her hard-earned money under the no tax on tips policy, or the lineman burning the midnight oil to restore power and seeing a tax cut under the no tax on overtime policy would be surprised to learn that Democrats consider them wealthy. Secretary Bessent, whether it is those policies or the tax relief in the bill for seniors, the double child tax credit and standard deduction, or the fact that the tax burden on the truly wealthy will actually rise under this bill, how does the one big beautiful bill deliver primarily for working families?
Thank you for that question, Chairman Smith. As we saw in President Trump's first term, substantial non-inflationary growth was created. Non-inflationary growth. Real wages rose, and working Americans did better. Hourly workers did better than supervisory workers. We believe that this will happen again. As you outlined, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the tax breaks for seniors on Social Security, and the ability to deduct auto loans on new cars made in America, as was available when I bought my first car in 1978, will be restored. All of this will help working Americans overcome this horrendous affordability crisis that this administration inherited.
The Biden administration negotiated a global tax scheme through the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that would rob American taxpayers of $120 billion and would discriminate against American businesses. President Trump issued a day one executive order opposing the Biden administration's global tax surrender. In the one big beautiful bill, Congress provides the president, in line with that directive, specific targeted authorities to fight back in the event nations impose a discriminatory tax on American businesses, such as a UTPR. Last week, members of this committee met with an ambassador who was specifically concerned about how this provision would give the U.S. the ability to stand up for American businesses and respond to an unfair tax his country has imposed on American job creators. Secretary Bessent, why is it important for the Treasury Department and the President to have strong protective measures like the one provided in the One Big Beautiful Bill to fight against foreign taxes that discriminate against American companies? And how will the administration ensure that the use is targeted and in a manner to protect or replace U.S. tax revenue?
Mr. Chairman, for whatever reason, the previous administration chose to outsource American sovereignty on tax matters, and the Trump administration believes that is unacceptable. Unacceptable. Many other countries would seek to pull in revenues from U.S. multinational corporations into their treasuries. And rest assured that the provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill to combat this are a staking out of our fiscal sovereignty. The U.S. tax system will stand next to what is called Pillar 2, and other countries are welcome to relinquish their fiscal and tax sovereignty to other nations. The United States will not. So this bill will allow us to prevent our corporate revenues from being drained into foreign treasuries, and that is in the hundreds of billions of dollars.
Thank you, Secretary. President Trump is also using tariffs to level the playing field and demand fair treatment for American workers, farmers, and manufacturers. Secretary, you are on the front lines of the president's economic policy agenda, including through your lead role in trade negotiations to demand fair treatment from China over the last couple days. How do the president's trade policies and tariffs and the total reset of our unfair trade and investment relationship with China that President Trump has led fit into the broader effort to reorient America's economy toward one that serves the working class instead of just the wealthy elites?
Mr. Chairman, China currently has the most imbalanced economy in the history of the world. They now have an approximate 30% share of global manufacturing, and they continually grow their manufacturing base. They are in the midst of a real estate downturn, some may cause a crisis, and they are trying to export their way out of it rather than take domestic measures such as increasing consumption, dealing with banking problems, or dealing with the real estate crisis. They cannot be allowed to export their way back to prosperity, which would mean substantial decreases in the standards of living, not only for the United States working Americans, but for working citizens across the world. Our negotiations with all countries seek to bring fairness. And I will echo President Trump's remarks. There are 18 important trading partners that we are in fulsome negotiations with. Many of them are coming to us with unimaginably good trade deals to bring down tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, which the academic research has shown can be even more pernicious than the tariffs, currency manipulation, and the subsidy of labor and industry. But as these countries come to us, and I look at the list, and I think, how could this have happened? how could this have happened? That the United States willingly they became party to such unfair and unbalanced trade. And as President Trump has said, I don't blame the other countries. If you could get away with it, you should. It was those sitting behind the Resolute desk or those making trade policy who've allowed this to happen over 40 years. And we are determined to rebalance that for the American people.
Thank you, Secretary. I now recognize the ranking member for any questions he might have.
Thank you, Chairman. So maybe we could stick to a couple of facts here, as previously discussed, and that is that if you made $1 million last year, you're going to get about $84,000 in tax relief with this bill. If you made under $50,000, you are likely to get about $1 a day. The President said that we'd have 90 trade agreements in 90 days. We're 89 short because of the manner in which some of these allies have been offended. We want trade balance for sure, but we also want to make sure that it's done in a manner that will last, not subject to the whims of the administration. I understand, Mr. Secretary, that you don't agree with some of the economic forecasts that have been projected as it relates to the big, beautiful bill. So Penn Wharton says this bill will add trillions of dollars to the national debt. The Yale Budget Lab says this will add trillions of dollars to the national debt. Well, we're 0 for 2. But how about Maya McGinnis? Not exactly known for their socialist leanings. They say this will add trillions of dollars to the national debt. Well, let's go to the Tax Foundation, hardly a left-leaning political organization. They say this will add trillions of dollars to the national debt because the money's going to be borrowed. Here, facts should matter. The advice of experts should matter. We have seen the bond market's reaction to some of these proposals. They're jittery. But you know what? In this committee, we listen. The administration is putting its head in the sand on this debt issue. The facts are going to be hard to escape. So let me turn to the impact of budget reconciliation as it relates to health care. In addition to adding trillions to the U.S. debt, the bill will cause 16 million Americans to lose part or all of their health insurance, according to CBO. We know what the consequence will be of losing health insurance for the American family. More visits to the emergency room, more postponed treatments, more bankruptcies that will come because of it. The problems that people have with health insurance only mean that later on the problems pile up. Bad health, the challenge that is now going to occur for our rural hospitals, surely many of which will be forced to close. Cutting more than $1.5 trillion from Medicaid, Medicare, and the Affordable Care Act certainly will mean job losses. No industry can sustain $1.5 trillion in cuts while we borrow money for a big tax cut that, despite what has been said here today, still favors people overwhelmingly at the top. Let me say, in regard to the testimony, Mr. Secretary, that you've offered, there's another key consideration here. You're suggesting that the improvements at the IRS have all taken place in the last 6 months? It's because of what we did with the Inflation Reduction Act. That's why the improvements have taken place, the technological upgrades that have taken place as well. We have a pretty good understanding of this. We want to use artificial intelligence for better tax collections. But all of this just happened in the last 6 months. That's our understanding based upon the testimony. The Commonwealth Fund, cuts to Medicaid and SNAP are going to lead to the loss of over 1 million jobs. The American Hospital Association estimates that tens of thousands of hospital jobs will be lost as a result of these cuts. Furthermore, a professor at Yale has said that this will conservatively cause tens of thousands of unnecessary deaths. Worse health care, job losses, more borrowed money. The American people deserve considerably better than what we're being told. But let me offer this challenge, Mr. Secretary. We would be prepared on the minority side to work with the administration and direct tax relief back to people under $400,000 of joint income, as opposed to the suggestion that is being offered here today. And if you disagree with the number that I offered about tax relief for somebody who made $1 million last year, let me give you the last 30 seconds to speak to that.
The Representative Neal, I have great respect for you. We've had good conversations, but respectfully, if I weigh 1,000 pounds and you weigh 50, and I gain 10 pounds, or I gain 10%, I have gained 100,000. That during President Trump's first tax cuts, the share of taxes paid by the high end of taxpayers, increased by more than 7%. And I'm sorry, I chuckled when you talked about the IT at the IRS. The program is 35 years behind schedule, 35 years. And is wasting $2 billion a year.
That's why we put the extra money in, Mr. Secretary.
No. The extra money went in for bodies, and whistleblowers acknowledged that standards were being lowered to bring in new agents. The money is not the issue here. It is how the money is spent.
That's exactly right. We agree on that, how the money is spent. And the last point that I would make...
It has been spent poorly.
Let me make this last point, Mr. Secretary. Do you agree with the idea that in 2017, that the federal government, emanating from this committee, borrowed $2.3 trillion for that tax cut?
What the belief is that everyone on the Democratic side voted for the biggest blowout for the deficit in history, and that we are suffering from that. This past tax year, we will have between a 6.5 and 6.7% deficit, so I find it very difficult to be lectured to by people who created the largest deficit in history when we were not at war and not in a recession.
So I negotiated with Secretary Mnuchin the pandemic relief bill. If that's the reference point. That's where overwhelmingly the money went. That was not a bad infusion of money. It worked. The Economist magazine and the Financial Times said in January, the American economy was the envy of the world. I yield back my time,
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
the spending was not the envy of the world.
I'm pleased to recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Buchanan.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here today. There's no doubt that your knowledge of finance and global markets bring a unique and welcome perspective to the Treasury, and this country is fortunate to have your leadership. Since coming to Congress, I've seen administrations from both parties, I'll say that up front, in terms of what's happened with the debt deficit. I want to get your perspective. I mean, the reality is, last 20 years, over $20 trillion in additional debt. I remember in the 80s, frankly, where we had the junk bond markets. If I look at all these younger people out here, what we're leaving them is deplorable. And I just want to make sure that we're giving as much consideration as we can to that. 49 out of 50 governors have to balance the budget. It's my biggest issue up here. It's not about one party or the other. It's both parties have done little or nothing in this area, and it needs to get addressed. When you spend last year, you take in $5 trillion, spend $7 trillion, and you average over $1 trillion a year for over the last 20 years. We need to get real about it, because again, in the 70s, in the 80s, all the junk bond, I seen what happened with all the markets and all that. So can you make, I know you touched on it, but could you, we'll get into the pro-growth things in a minute. Can you just touch on it, your thoughts about where we're at and where we're going as it relates to that? I know we've got people looking at making cuts, but I do want to get your perspective on that.
Congressman, I've enjoyed our conversations in the past. You, as a very successful private businessman, understand the power of this tax bill, especially in the expensing. You and I discussed it in great detail. And look, we do not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We are right in line with the long-term revenues of approximately 17 to 18% of GDP. What we've seen here is a blowout in the spending. And as I was saying, last fiscal year, was something we have never seen before. We have never seen a deficit to GDP this large when we were not at war, or not in a recession, or not in a pandemic.
Yeah,
But we
Mr.
could call that
Secretary,
a war.
we only have 5 minutes. Let me just
oh.
mention just real quickly. You mentioned, and I just want to get this in, that 100% expensing is like jet fuel. And 199 is huge. These are huge opportunities to make a big difference for small business. But to me, it's because I'm so passionate about it, because they're the job creators. So can you comment on that, your thoughts in terms of 199A and 100% expensing?
Congressman, I'll very quickly comment on two things. It is the 100% expensing that is powerful, and we are adding not only expensing for equipment, as in President Trump's first term, we are adding 100% for factory structures. So if you want to build your factory here in the U.S., we want it to be tax efficient. We want you to have regulatory certainty. We want you to have quick permitting, and that is likely the single most powerful aspect. As the ranking member discussed, on the 400,000 level, that unfortunately is a disaster for small business in the 199. Most small businesses are pass-through entities, and those small businesses are substantially above that 400,000 threshold.
Yeah, let me just add just a closing point. I do want to make on the whole thing of full expensing. It's probably the most powerful tool, whether you're buying or selling. Someone that's been in business for 40 years or so, I can tell you firsthand, it's a powerful tool. It's a job creating tool. I did want to have you comment the other thing on making, I'd say in Florida, I was chairman of the Florida Chamber, one of the big issues there is about making the tax, whatever we do on taxes, making it permanent, so they got more certainty, they can do planning and investing in terms of going forward. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, sir. I was with a group of business leaders earlier this week, and they were telling me that they are, in fact, holding back on CapEx because they need for the tax bill to pass so that they will have certainty that the 100% expensing will come back. I think that we will see a sharp upward break in terms of CapEx as soon as we pass the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Thank you, and thanks for your leadership. We're excited you're here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doggett.
Thank you. If beauty is in the eye of the beholder, certainly I can understand, Mr. Secretary, why you and the members of the Trump cabinet are so enthusiastic about this beautiful bill. It gives so much to those at the top, and of course Trump appointees are not just in the top 1%, but the top 1,000th of 1%. I applaud your personal success, but isn't it true that for you and for a number of cabinet members and other Trump appointees, simply not having your taxes restored to the level that existed when President Bush and President Obama were in office at 39.6%, will provide you very substantial personal benefit? Yes or no?
That is not a yes or no question, sir.
All right, if you can't answer it.
As many people
Thank you, reclaiming my time. If you can't answer,
have different tax
reclaiming my time, please, sir.
And it is shown,
Mr. Chairman, I don't want my time taken if the witness will not yield.
I would recommend, Mr. Doggett, that if you asked a question, at least allow them to answer.
You can recommend it, but you're taking my time from
your
him
time
answering
is
the
moving,
questions.
so
Continue.
use it.
Let me say, I understand you can't answer that with a yes or no. I'm concerned about the weaponization of the Internal Revenue Tax Code by the President and your role in it. Section 7217 of the Internal Revenue Code makes it unlawful for the President and his partners like you requesting IRS to conduct or terminate an audit or other investigation of a particular taxpayer. Section 6103, as you're familiar, protects taxpayer privacy. Yet in violation of both, the President began threatening Harvard in April, and on May 2nd, he declared, we're going to be taking away Harvard's tax-exempt status. It's what they deserve. And you've been part of the we when you said on May 23rd that you publicly declared that you were moving forward on this, that there were a substantial number of rules that Harvard may have violated. Can you tell me, yes or no, whether you can pledge to avoid any interference in IRS audits or investigations of particular taxpayers? And if you can't answer that yes or no, just say so, and then I'll move on to the next question.
Sir, that is without question that I will follow the law.
All right, sir. Can you tell us whether, yes or no, you can report back to this committee in 30 days after investigating to assure us that there have not been any requests by the president, any political appointee, or any family member of the president to direct or influence the audit or termination of an audit or investigation of any taxpayer or entity?
Well, Congressman, as you said, this is all private matters, so it would be out of line for me to report back on any of this. But I can assure you that I will follow the law and all proper procedures.
Thank you. I'm just asking you whether you can report back in 30 days whether there has been any attempt, I'm not asking for the specifics of who was involved, by the president or any of the other people I mentioned, to influence or direct any audit or investigation of a taxpayer. Can you do that, sir?
Well, I can report right here. I am not in the habit of repeating private conversations, but the president and I have never had a conversation on Harvard's tax status. So I will report that right here. We don't need 30 days.
I'm not asking just about Harvard. If they can pick on Harvard, they can pick on anyone. And I'm just asking for a simple report on whether there have been any efforts of that, whether from the president or one of his associates. And it would seem to me that would be easy to do. But let me move also to the question of privacy as it relates to data sharing. Do you agree that there is no authorization for the IRS to share tax data broadly with DOJ or federal agencies for the general purpose of data consolidation?
Section 6103 protects taxpayers' information. We have followed all proper procedures, and including in terms of the data sharing with the Department of Homeland Security. We are allowed to share taxpayers' information for those taxpayers who are believed to be criminals or have committed a crime.
I'm asking you about DOJ and its apparent effort to have an omnibus information sharing agreement with agencies. Do you agree that you cannot share taxpayer data without statutory authorization from this Congress, and you don't have any for that purpose?
We will follow the direction of the regulations and the court, sir.
Are you sharing any taxpayer information with DOJ for this omnibus information sharing agreement where they seem to probe into the privacy of every American, consolidating it with Social Security and other private information? Or is there such sharing going on now, sir?
Well, first of all, I would push back on that characterization.
You can do so.
And
I just want to know if you're sharing in the time that remains.
I will tell you, and there seems to be a misunderstanding among many people on your side of the aisle on what DOJ is. DOJ employees.
I understand you had some misunderstanding about it, and Mr. Musk yourself, but let me ask you again, just simply on the question I'm asking, are you sharing any of this data with DOJ without congressional authorization?
As I said, we are following all of the laws.
Thank you. I would have appreciated an answer to my question, but I will yield back since my time has expired.
Mr. Smith is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for sharing your time here today. And I've not been around here as long as Mr. Neal has, but I do want to bring in a bit of a historical perspective that I think is relevant. Looking back, you know, we can argue about CBO and JCT, and it's an imperfect system. And I think that's manifested itself in various hits and misses on projections, whether it goes all the way back to the original parts of the cost of Medicare that was way underestimated, or whether it was the structure of a more market-based approach with Medicare Modernization Act that precedes my time here, but actually cost a lot less than was projected. You go to the receipts, post-2017 tax action, the receipts exceeded what was projected. So we have an imperfect system, but it's what we have. And I think we need to go on that. Now, you take things a step further, and I remember the president's economic advisor, Mr. Hassett, pointing out that with COVID, yes, there was bipartisan action. I'll say that a few of those components still give me heartburn, as much as an emergency that we found ourselves in. But when, at the beginning of COVID, when unemployment spiked and the GDP dipped, Congress acted. By the end of 2020, GDP was back to about even. New President Biden was advised not to spend what he insisted on spending. I would suggest they're probably grappling with going back to the Obama stimulus, and they think that the only mistake of the Obama stimulus, so-called, was it didn't spend enough money, rather than address the bureaucratic approach that, like the joke was shovel ready, maybe wasn't what it was described to be. But we have these imperfect projection systems, and yet we've got the reality of experience. And I think this is important to note, and especially on the IRS structure and the desire to spend money on more people at the IRS, because that could generate more audits and that would generate more revenue, and then we can spend that revenue that, good grief, still wasn't enough to cover what the actual IRA costs came in and came to be. So we have to deal with these realities, and it's because they're imperfect systems that we just have to acknowledge. And that's why, Mr. Secretary, I had not heard the numbers on the IRS, and especially in these efforts most recently, that we were told that if we pushed back on the number of new IRS agents and auditors, we were going to undermine the revenues. And yet a different approach that focused more on technology, because there was a willingness to focus more on technology here on this side of the dais than there was with just hiring more people that actually, even in the best of scenarios, did not come to be, thank goodness, I might add. But we are in a situation now where in 2017, we did what was right, and I'm glad that there was bipartisan support to extend a lot of what we did in 2017 that did not have bipartisan support then. Now, that didn't pass the Senate. We are where we are, and now heading into a situation where what we have at hand with this reconciliation bill is good for workers. It's good for workers, it's good for economic expansion and encouraging investment and increasing productivity so that we can grow the economy without triggering inflation. President Biden was warned not to push more spending by Democrats, I might add. I think of Mr. Summers primarily, advising against that. Did it anyway. We are still paying the price. We're trying to dig out from a lot of that. And that's why we're doing the bill that we are. Gosh, I have other things that I'd love to ask questions on. But I think it's important to realize that we need to deal with reality here. That's what we are doing. And Mr. Secretary, thank you. I look forward to further conversations, whether it's trade, whether it's IRS, whether it's various things that we need to do to get our country to a better place, realizing that the solutions are really in the private sector and triggering everything we can on our side to encourage the private sector to provide more opportunity. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. You know, the economic outlook of the United States has soured a bit since President Trump assumed office. We've gone from record lows in unemployment, historic growth, and lowering inflation to unprecedented trade wars, volatile markets, and low consumer sentiment. And for the record, Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter surveys from consumers from the University of Michigan, a trade war impacting the shipping economy, and the OECD article on the downward turn in economic turn in the U.S.
Without objection.
Thank you. This is only made worse by the Republicans' big, ugly bill and the administration's proposed budget. I have a few items I want to raise with you, Mr. Secretary, but given our limited time, I want to focus on the projected impact of the reconciliation legislation. Economists from the CBO, the JCT, the University of Pennsylvania, Yale University, the Committee for Responsible Budget, and the Bipartisan Policy Center have all projected that this legislation will add trillions of dollars to our national debt. Experts have also projected that close to 16 million Americans will lose access to their health care, and 11 million Americans will lose access to nutrition benefits. These figures aren't coming from Democratic talking points. They're coming from economic experts with years of expertise. Yet, Mr. Secretary, you have time and again gone public and said that you dispute these claims. I believe you're a very intelligent and very competent individual. You're a Yale graduate, an adjunct professor, served as the managing partner of the George Soros Fund Management Office in London, and led Key Square Capital Management, a global hedge fund, and you're a billionaire. So the question I have is, why is it that you seem intent on disavowing any and all expert opinions that are inconvenient to your political agenda? Unfortunately, it strikes me that you are hell-bent on ignoring the warnings of any independent expert whose opinions may not serve your goals. When you worked in finance and your analyst told you that a proposal was a bad idea, I suspect that you listened to your analysis and didn't just accept the deal because the person proposing it said they were wrong and that their deal was a good deal. That would be wrong, it would be irresponsible, and it would be dangerous. I would submit that in the position that you have now, it is even worse. It's more wrong, it's more irresponsible, and it's more dangerous. Mr. Secretary, can you point to one independent study, one study performed by an expert PhD economist who is not on the payroll of this administration, that says that this legislation will not add to our national debt?
Well, Congressman, if
Yes or no? Can you point to one?
if we want to look at the CBO, which
No, I'm not asking you, is there an independent expert that you can point to that says that this bill will not add to our national debt? Yes or no?
yes,
There is?
yes,
What are they?
Art Laffer,
Pardon me?
Art Laffer.
Art Laffer? Great. That I don't think that one counts. Mr. Secretary, did the 2001 Bush tax cuts add to our debt?
Sorry?
Did the 2001 Bush tax cuts add to our debt? Yes or no?
Again, Congressman.
Yes or no?
I think it's important to look at framing here.
Okay,
One
I'm
thing
reclaiming
that-
my time. It's
one
clear
thing-
that you're not going to answer the questions that are asked. And let me make it real simple for you. The Bush tax cuts added to the debt. The second round of Bush tax cuts added to our national debt. The last Trump tax cuts added to our national debt. And every expert will tell you that the proposed Trump tax cuts will also add to our national debt. That is the honest answer, and I would have expected you could have just given us a yes or no on whether or not these preposterous tax cuts that will benefit clearly the most wealthy people, the people who don't need a tax cut in this environment, will add to our national debt. This is bad public policy, it's bad for the American taxpayers, it's bad for our economy, and it's atrocious for our future in regard to the national debt, and I yield back.
Next, we have the chairman of our tax committee, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding me. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here today. We get into these back and forth, and it comes down to who struck John. I think both sides of the aisle can talk about things and policies in the past that caused wherever we are today to be wherever we are today. The question isn't about the history of how we got here. The question is, how do we remedy it? How do we fix it going forward? I'm from the private sector. And I really do believe before anybody should ever serve in public office, they should have been in the private sector and worked where they got paid on commission only and had lost their job at least once and had faced an unbelievable task of trying to keep your business open when there was no revenue coming in. So I don't want to grill you and all these things of asking you a question and not allowing you to answer it, because that seems to become the thing. I'd rather go back to consistency and certainty. The hardest thing for anybody in the private sector is trying to figure out what the next administration is going to do, or what's going to happen at midterms, and whether I'm going to make an investment or not going to make an investment, because that can change overnight. I get that, and I'm sitting here now and I'm trying to figure out, no wonder hardworking American taxpayers have lost faith in the way we operate. But I just want to ask you this, because I think it's really critical. So I have kind of a little bit of a football background. I look at this, we're in the fourth quarter now. It's a 2-minute warning and no timeouts left. I want you to share with us what could happen, and forget the Potomac amnesia about who's responsible for it. Let's go to what actually is going to happen if this bill doesn't get passed. How is it going to affect hardworking American taxpayers?
Congressman, good to see you again. It is what we call in economics a sudden stop. It would be cataclysmic. It would be the largest tax hike in history. It would be a disaster for businesses, for working Americans, and for our status in the world. That to have this happen, we would see increases in taxes on thousands of dollars of working Americans. We would see business contract, and we would see a substantial increase in the unemployment rate.
So as you look at what's taking place right now, and I think there's always the back and forth about do these tariffs work, do they not work? Just from a standpoint, your background is incredible for you to be in this position today. So I want to thank you for doing that, because you stepped out of a pretty comfortable life where people weren't firing questions at you, not allowing you to answer them. Just going forward, and you told people just now what's going to happen if we don't get this passed. So what is it that, in addition to what we could do, that we're not already doing?
Congressman, it is certainty and permanence. As we have seen, the corporate tax rate is permanent. We are not arguing on that here. Businesses have great certainty. Households do not. Small businesses do not. And this administration, myself especially, given my small town roots, they are laser focused that Main Street can do well here. And Main Street is a series of small business owners who work every week to make payroll. On average, 9 employees, family owned, and this would be cataclysmic for them. On the other side, having permanence, being able to invest, being able to hire more workers, being able to expand, will lead a Main Street resurgence. We will also see a manufacturing resurgence. Approximately 9% of Americans are now engaged in the manufacturing sector. History has shown us that wage growth occurs more readily in the manufacturing sector for working class Americans than in the service sector. So the combination of small business and manufacturing, along with the president's tax agenda for no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, a tax cut for seniors, and the ability to buy a new American-made car and deduct the interest, they will solve this horrendous affordability crisis. Because the way to think about it, Congressman, we are dealing with 2 things here. We are dealing with affordability, and we are dealing with inflation. Affordability is the stock of inflation, and we are working to pull that down. That can be pulled down 2 ways, through price levels or increase real wages. I think we can do both, but the real fill-up here would be increase real wages for working Americans. On the other side, we just saw yet another fantastic inflation number, much of that due to decrease in energy prices.
Thank you for being here, and again, for you to step out of your private life, which is very comfortable, to step into this arena, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us today and your service. We appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming before the committee as well. It's pretty clear, and listen, who needs to get into arguments when you need answers? And but you can see the frustration on this side. I appreciate your loyalty to the president and understanding your responsibility, but it seems pretty clear that in the time that we're given to ask a question, et cetera, the reason that people are seeking yes and no answers is because of the time that's allotted. It has nothing to do with you personally or whatever. You're obviously very bright and intelligent. So, Mr. Secretary, would you agree that I give great credit to Representative Massey, who stood on the floor and addressed the Congress during the debate on this bill, and he never criticized the president. He never criticized a fellow Republican. What he did was address the facts, and he laid them out very clearly. Let me quote what he had to say here. This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math if it wants, but bond investors don't. This week, they sent us a message. Moody's downgraded our credit rating, and the bond investors who buy and finance our debt demanded higher interest rates on a 10-year note, 20-year note, and 30-year note. What does this mean? Very soon, the government will be paying $16,000 in interest for paying $16,000 of interest alone per U.S. family. What are we telling them? Instead of taking care of that problem, we are going to give them a tax break. The frustration you hear up here, of course, is that there's denial that tax breaks don't add to the national debt. Was Moody's wrong? Was Representative Massey's assessment wrong?
I can tell you that clearly Representative Massey doesn't understand the bond market, and that any 24-hour window, as he's just said, is incorrect. That I will point out that the U.S. 10-year, which I repeatedly reference, is the only major 10-year bond that has a lower yield this year. So has a lower yield today than it did on January 1st or January 20th. German yields are higher, Japanese yields are substantially higher, but U.S. 10-year yields are lower. So I'm not sure what's on Representative Massey's mind.
So Massey is wrong, and Moody's was wrong too?
Moody's, even the Democrats say that.
What do you mean, even the Democrats?
The last time that the U.S.
I don't know. What do you have to do with Moody's? You know,
in 2011, when the U.S. was downgraded, Larry Summers, then NEC head, called Moody's a lagging indicator.
Is Moody's wrong or right? Yes or no?
Moody's is a lagging indicator.
Okay,
and
so
anyone who
you can understand the frustration, and I appreciate your
Moody's
intelligence and ability to talk over. But when we're addressing the American people and we're in a hearing like this, someone as bright and as capable as you are could explain to the American people and still remain loyal to the president, loyal to our colleagues on this dais who supported the bill. There is a strong difference of opinion. And that's what is being expressed here, opinion. There's no focus or dedication on the actual facts. We'll find that out, and people on this aisle are saying, well, don't worry, there's going to be no impact on kids not getting food, 16 million people being kicked off of their health insurance. That's some mirage. That's some fictitious notion that Democrats have made up. And this national debt stuff, well, whether it's Moody's, whoever it is who has come out, whether it's the Wharton School, they're all wrong or misguided or uninformed, as Secretary Massey was. I yield back.
Mr. Schweikert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, how's the jet lag?
Been better.
Yeah, it's
better.
Look, it's impressive, but I don't know if you get frequent flyer miles for all this traveling.
No, but I take my responsibilities of reporting to Congress very seriously.
No, we appreciate you making the effort to get here. I'm going to give you something that's a little bit different, but it's more some of the things we specialize with the Joint Economic Committee and those. We'd like to actually engage, this is probably more technical staff, on what we can do to actually, there's things we can do policy-wise, message-wise, product-wise, in regards to moving away from notes and bills and being able to create some additional interest liquidity on the bonds, moving out in the curve. With past Treasury secretaries, we've done presentations on everything from Professor Schiller's Trill's idea, where it's a bond, but it actually has a slight attachment to as an equity interest in the U.S. tax receipts, so therefore it's sympathetic with tax revenues, to things you've actually written about, or your team around you have written about, certain gold indexes and other things for long-term debt. My interest is very much, and this is a intellectual conflict many of us in Congress have, the substantial portion of growth of debt is demographics. We don't like to tell people the truth, but we have a dramatic shortage of young people in the country. Today, compared to 20 years ago, we have double the number of people 65, but our 18-year-olds are exactly the same as 20 years ago. It's demographics. And we're going to try to make demographics partisan, because that's what we do. How does someone like me work with your team to actually give you product ideas, messaging to the markets and liquidity that going along on the curve is stable, and we're going to be there to protect our full faith and credit?
Congressman, you raise a very important issue, and what you're talking about is something called the dependency ratio. The U.S. is the only major industrialized economy where that ratio is roughly stable. It is in slight decline. Many other economies, Italy, Japan in particular, they are seeing the dependency ratio blow out, and hence their productive capability. We would welcome the opportunity to engage with you and your staff on any ideas that you may have. Right now, we are committed to the regular cadence of Treasury issuance as it is. I would add that in my lifetime, and I can't believe, to go back to experts, we always see, it's this industrial revolution, it's that industrial revolution. I'm not sure whether we're on the fourth or fifth, but I do believe that we are on an industrial revolution, an AI revolution that may lead to a productivity breakthrough that could be very important.
Mr. Secretary, you're stealing one of my speeches, but synthetic biology, AI, automation, and that's actually it's a side conversation on reindustrialization and the actual statistical information of how much of that's going to be labor substituted by automation, and therefore we may not get the same wage growth in the academic literature, but that's going to geeking out a little bit. My great interest is, I don't believe many of us on this committee have spent enough time, whether it be a Democrat in the White House, a Republican, on debt management, and the fact we on this committee have the responsibility to work with you in Treasury to have as much stability in that model. Because today we borrow, about $72,000 a second? Outside the math for extraordinary measures.
I haven't done it by second, but I think
yeah,
I've been on a daily basis. But Congressman, I can tell you, the thing that would give us the greatest debt stability is the increasing the debt ceiling.
No,
Because
I don't disagree
that
with
is a cataclysmic outcome that we will never allow to happen.
Mr. Secretary, absolutely agree. Visibility, capacity is important. But even your own numbers, in 9 years, we borrow about $100,000 a second, almost solely driven by demographics, healthcare, Medicare, and interest. I beg of you, it's hard to do in front of these microphones because it's uncomfortable to talk about, but it's math, and it's the reality of what we are as people. We need to work together to provide visibility to these debt markets. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Davis from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. Today, Secretary Bessent appears here to praise the Republican One Big Beautiful Bill. That is the most cruel, draconian, inhumane legislation that I've voted on since I've been here. Government, I seriously believe, should help people and not hurt them. I reject this bill that makes poor people poorer, sick people sicker, and hungry people hungrier. I reject this bill that rips health care from 16 million Americans, with over 498,000 Illinoisans expected to lose their health insurance, including 102,000 children and 27,000 seniors in my district alone. I reject this bill that threatens my constituent Deborah and her 2 children, whom she adopted from foster care. The picture behind me shows Deborah's children, who are medically fragile and rely solely on Medicaid for their health care. I reject this bill that will close hospitals in my district and kick people out of their nursing homes, not only in my district, but across the country, especially in urban inner city communities and rural communities for sure. I reject this bill that explodes poverty and suffering while giving wealthy trillions in tax cuts. And I reject this bill's irresponsible explosion of the deficit that triggers statutory cuts to critical programs supporting children and families. These pay-go reductions would eliminate funding for the maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting program, known as MACV, that have proven to improve mother and child health, family safety, and child development. It would eliminate the guaranteed funding for the Mary Lee Allen Promoting Safe and Stable Families program that we know helps prevent child maltreatment and strengthen families. It would eradicate the social services block grant that provides substantial investment in child care, child welfare, and adult protective services. These egregious cuts alone will cost Illinoisans over $72 million and hurt Illinois children, seniors, and families. I reject this bill that gives tax cuts to the wealthy, paid for by denying and depriving low-income, poor people, senior citizens, sick people, unhealthy people, the health care, food assistance, housing assistance, and economic development opportunities that they need. This bill reminds me that there is something rotten in Denmark. There is something wrong with the thinking that puts such a bill in front of us. This bill is actually what we call the Robin Hood in reverse. Take from the poor, take from the disabled, take from the sick, take from the hungry, and give to the wealthy. It is not good, it is immoral. I reject it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. LaHood is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Thanks for your service to our country. I would argue, Mr. Secretary, that President Trump got elected last November on two issues, fixing the unmitigated disaster at our southern border and fixing the economy. And obviously you play a big role in fixing the economy and working with us on that. Go back a year ago, we had high inflation, high interest rates, unaffordable energy costs, supply chain frustrations. And that factored into people going to the polls and wanting a change on the economy. And as we think about the bill that we've put together, the One Big Beautiful Bill, there's lots of things in this bill that help this economy. But fundamental to that is making permanent things like 199A, bonus depreciation, research and development tax credit, the affordable housing tax credit, unleashing American energy, all included in this bill. And I think we predicate this bill on how do we have predictability and certainty long-term in this economy. And those investments that are made by small, medium, and large companies, whether you're a plumber in Peoria, Illinois, or you're a Fortune 100 company, you want predictability and certainty. And as been alluded to earlier, if we do nothing and this bill doesn't pass, you're gonna have $4.5 trillion of tax increases. And if you think there's uncertainty in the economy now, wait until that happens. And so the other, I think, observation that's been made is there's a lot of money and resources sitting on the sidelines waiting to be invested. But we need that predictability and certainty. And I would argue we do that in this bill. I wanted to ask you if you can comment on what this bill will do to the economy and on predictability and certainty.
Good, Congressman, thank you for that. And I would also like to talk about what this bill will not do to the economy. Because what we saw in the tax bill of under the Biden administration, which I believe was immoral, was rampant inflation. Rampant inflation, which is the best way to steal from working Americans. And the basket of goods and services that working Americans require had a substantially higher inflation rate than the 21% reported by the Bureau of Statistics. So in excess of 30% of purchasing power was stolen from working families. We had, in the summer of 2024, we had a record amount of food bank usage in the United States of America at the same time that the previous administration's tax bill, we had a record number of trips to Europe. And that is not an America we want. Record trips to Europe, record food bank usage. So anyone who voted for that tax bill, that was the outcome. What we are doing is trying to get back, as you said, to President Trump's private sector job growth creation. And the tax bill will incentivize private sector growth. Equally important, this administration's economic plan is a three-legged stool. It is trade, it is taxes, and it is deregulation. And what we saw under the Biden administration that created the great inflation was we saw the impetus in spending as the government flooded the zone, but we saw substantial regulatory increase, so a demand shock was met with supply constraints. What we are doing with the help of this committee and congressmen like you, we are creating a private sector demand shock that is going to be met with a deregulatory release. So we will go back to 2018 and 2019, we will have strong growth and it will be non-inflationary.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. There was no tax bill passed during the Biden administration, and I know that because I served on this committee during that administration. So I just wanted to clarify that. And in the interest of time, because our time here is limited, I'm going to ask you to please limit your answers to yes or no questions, and I'm going to jump straight into those questions. Mr. Secretary, do you still believe that the president's tariffs are going to be a one-time price adjustment for American families?
If prices go up, they will be one time.
Okay, well, unfortunately, you appear to be talking out of both sides of your mouth, because you yourself have admitted, after conversations with Walmart, that some tariff costs are going to get passed on to consumers. And in fact, we've already seen that prices are rising on many everyday goods.
Congresswoman,
please
today,
don't interrupt
today
me.
we had
The time is mine. The time is mine. Please don't interrupt me. I will ask you questions, and I will grant you an opportunity to answer them, but please don't interrupt me during my time.
With pleasure.
Okay, I know I'm a woman, but please try to limit yourself to answering my questions. No, I'm sorry, but we get talked over all the time, and I don't want that to happen at this hearing.
I would remind members, the gentlelady is recognized. Please proceed.
Thank you. The time is mine. Clothing is going up 20%. Shoe prices and canned goods like chicken noodle soup and canned fruit and microwave meals have gone up 15%. Toys are getting more expensive. Walmart just raised the prices of dinosaur action figures by 38% and baby-born dolls by 43%. Household goods like drills, toolkits, vacuums have also gone up. Stanley Black & Decker recently announced higher prices for all of their products, and these are just some of the products that are affected. On average, Trump's tariffs are estimated to cost households $3,000 more for the same goods than they would have last year. And that's money that could be going to...
That's incorrect, and
that is
I'm
not
not sure
incorrect.
who's estimated.
The best estimates are that consumers will pay $3,000 more for the same goods
And that estimate is from
that
whom?
they did last year.
That estimate's from whom,
I will get
Congresswoman?
you the estimates.
Right, because
But that's money that could be going to paying goods or paying rent and groceries. And it's clear that Trump's trade wars are hurting American families. Yet all we have to show for the economic pain are news reports of these flimsy trade deals. And I understand, Mr. Secretary, that you are co-leading the China trade negotiations. Do you think that China is a reliable trading partner?
I think we will see.
Well, pardon me for being skeptical of this administration's ability to get anything meaningful out of trade negotiations with China, because this administration is too swamped with trying to negotiate with 90 countries around the world. And to me, a poorly negotiated trade deal with China is probably not worth the paper that it's written on, because this is China's China's track record. These are facts. In the Trump administration's Phase 1 trade deal, China promised to increase purchases of U.S. goods and services by $200 billion over 2 years. Countless reports, and you yourself, have noted that China has failed to meet these purchase commitments. Those were purchase commitments that were negotiated by Trump in his first administration.
They met their agreements under President Trump in 2020, and President Biden did not enforce them, and the Chinese delegation told me that they did not believe they needed to adhere to them.
Reclaiming my time, that's incorrect. China has also not made the structural reforms that they promised Trump that they would. Many U.S. companies still reported widespread intellectual property theft and counterfeiting. So excuse me if the last attempt by the Trump administration to secure meaningful change from China doesn't exactly inspire any confidence in the current negotiations. And, you know, quite frankly, negotiating trade agreements with China requires more time and effort than this administration has given so far. And that's why I was alarmed to hear this morning that Trump said that the U.S. China deal was done after just 2 days of talks in London. Mr. Secretary, the press release on this so-called deal looks more like a framework. Congress, who has the constitutional authority over trade, needs the details of this supposed deal. So I'm asking if you will provide this committee with the actual details of this deal, because there has been, unlike what was said earlier, there has been no consultation with our side of the aisle, at least, on the China negotiation. Will you commit to giving us the specifics of that deal, the details?
The Congresswoman, I flew back at 4 a.m. this morning to be here this morning, and we are...
It's a simple yes or no question.
No, it is not a simple yes or no question. We are in the midst of constructing it, and back to your question, China has proven an unreliable partner in strategic.
Will you commit to consulting with us on trade deal with China?
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
I would ask the witness to be allowed to answer that last
Gentlewoman's
question.
time has expired. I
It's
now
a yes or no
recognize-
question. It's very simple.
Representative, I raised many of your concerns to the Chinese delegation, and it will be a longer process. The trade deal today, or last night, was for a specific goal, and it will be a much longer process. And I will note that the previous administration did nothing.
But excuse me, the
Mr.
question
Arrington
was
is
whether
now
or not you
recognized.
would
The
consult
gentlewoman's
with
time has
members of
expired.
Congress.
Mr. Arrington's time
It's my time
is
now.
now Mr. Arrington's time, 5 minutes.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service.